In the early 2000s, Enron, one of the U.S.'s largest energy companies, collapsed almost overnight. It had been hiding billions in debt through off-balance sheet accounting tricks. The scandal wiped out not only Enron, but also Arthur Andersen, one of the world's most respected auditing firms at the time. So what went wrong, and why didn't Arthur Andersen catch it? Well, they kind of did.
Enron used a special purpose entity and mark-to-market accounting, so they were technically allowed under US GAAP at that time. So the auditor, Arthur Andersen, checked whether Enron's SPE, the special purpose entities, met the formal rules for off-balance sheet treatment. But once the box was ticked, then Andersen accepted that the debts could be kept off Enron's balance sheet.
That's Minlei Ye, an associate professor of accounting at the University of Toronto. She studies the economics of auditing, the incentives, costs, and market dynamics that shape the profession. Auditors are meant to act as impartial gatekeepers, but their decisions are shaped by human biases, incentives, and sometimes conflicts of interest. Auditing firms are meant to be independent organizations. They work to confirm that what a company is publicly saying about its finances to investors, regulators, and the public is accurate. In practice, sometimes you end up with situations like Enron or the Lehman Brothers, where the auditing firms failed to catch the red flags that led to the pretty spectacular collapses of each organization. And this can have pretty devastating consequences.
Well, the investors will lose their savings, right? In general, overall, the investors will lose trust on the capital market, and then the businesses that require financing will not be able to raise sufficient fund. It will hinder the growth of the company and the economy as a whole.
What happens when the people entrusted to check the numbers miss the biggest red flags that can sink an entire company? What hidden biases shape their work? What happens to the economy when trust in the auditing process erodes? And what, if anything, can we do about it? Welcome to the Executive Summary. I'm Megan Haynes, editor of the Rotman Insights Hub. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is the role of an auditor?
Auditors are independent third party. They are regarded as gatekeepers in capital markets to protect the interest of investors. They will check the company's books, financial statements, to make sure that they present fairly the economic conditions of the company, and they issue an opinion on financial statements.
In theory, this protects investors from buying into a company that's riskier than it looks. In practice, though, it doesn't always work out that way. Even gatekeepers can miss or ignore the big picture. Take Enron. Executives hid nearly $40 billion US in debt through accounting tricks and off-the-book entities, effectively inflating the value of Enron. Like we mentioned earlier, they used some accounting maneuvers that were technically allowed. Enron's auditing firm, Arthur Andersen, signed off on the numbers, even though the auditors knew something was shady. How did this happen? Well, for one thing, there was a clear conflict of interest. Not only did Arthur Andersen offer auditing services, but also other consulting services, to the tune of millions per year. And a disappointing audit finding could jeopardize the other half of its business with its clients, effectively putting its status as an independent auditor on shaky ground. It was later revealed the firm even helped cover up some of the more fraudulent activity, shredding documents. As the fraud unraveled in the early 2000s, Enron collapsed and investors lost upward of $76 billion US. A similar situation played out over at the Lehman Brothers. While it was also being hammered by the subprime mortgage crisis in the US, it came to light that it had been using accounting tricks, what it called Repo 105, to hide some of its risk.
In that case, the short-term loans were disguised as sales by over-collateralizing and relying on a UK legal opinion.
In simple terms, Lehman labeled more than $50 billion worth of liabilities as sales. On paper, it looked profitable. In reality, the company was dangerously exposed. Ultimately, it was forced to file for bankruptcy, which kicked off the 2008 financial crisis, wiped out the investments of millions of Americans, and left thousands of employees looking for work. Both Enron and Lehman had auditors whose job it was to catch these red flags. And in both cases, the auditors signed off because the companies were technically compliant with the rules.
Compliance means just following the rules. So it means that the auditor only focuses on checking whether the financial statements are in compliance with financial reporting standards, rather than to check whether the financial statements present fairly the financial conditions of the company.
And that's a danger. Compliance-based audits can be technically correct, but still mislead investors and hide risks in plain sight. To get a truer picture of a company's financial health, Minlei suggests that companies use what's called fair presentation.
Instead of asking, does this contract meet the technical definition of revenue recognition under certain standards, the auditor can ask, is management using this contract to accelerate revenue in a misleading way?
But if that's the more accurate way to approach accounting, it's worth asking why companies don't already take this approach. It's partially systemic. For many firms, a compliance-first approach is just baked into their philosophy. For others, a focus on compliance keeps clients happy.
There are many incentives that can affect the auditor's decisions. For example, because auditors need to maintain a good client relationship with the manager to retain the clients. They are, after all, a profit-seeking company. They also want to maximize their profit. So retaining clients is a very important part of it.
So when it comes to the quality of a company's audits, there are these systemic biases that shape the outcome of an audit, like whether a company is incentivized to keep its clients happy or if they take that strict compliance approach to auditing. But the auditors themselves bring their own human biases to the table as well.
Like the familiarity, which means that when the audit firm has audited the client for a long period of time, and they tend to do the same thing next year instead of looking at what the new risks could be. And then there can be confirmation bias, only looking at the evidence that support the manager's assertions rather than looking for possible questioning or being skeptical about what has been presented in front of them. And then there can be also, for example, groupthink type of bias.
Groupthink can lead to multiple people agreeing with something with no one on a team questioning whether it's correct or accurate. Groupthink, familiarity, and confirmation bias aren't malicious choices. They're just natural human shortcuts. But when the stakes are billions of dollars, even that small blind spot can have massive consequences. Even positive external programs like incentives for whistleblowing can have unexpected effects on auditors. These programs often provide substantial rewards to employees who bring forward the financial misdeeds of their company. And in a 2025 study, Minlei looked at the impact those whistleblowing programs had on auditors.
Intuitively, we think audit effort increases because when whistleblowers are more incentivized to come forward to review the accounting wrongdoing, then again, audit failure is more likely to be discovered, and the auditor will likely to be held responsible for failing to discover the material misstatements in the financial statements.
Effectively, when auditors know a whistleblower could expose an error, they feel heightened pressure to do their job carefully. That's generally good, and Minlei's study found that whistleblowing programs do improve audit quality. But there is a flip side. When no whistleblowers come forward, regulators may take that as a signal that there is no whistleblowing-worthy activity, making them less likely to hold the auditors liable for mistakes, resulting in the auditors putting less effort into their work. This isn't to say we need to rethink whistleblowing programs because having them makes auditor reports worse. It's just an example of how an economic incentive and human nature inevitably impacts the quality of an audit. Take another example. One of Minlei's studies found that superstar auditors are sometimes kept off high-profile projects because the bosses are worried they'll be poached.
Instead of signing the high-talent partners to high-risk clients and relatively low-quality partners to low-risk clients, they might switch the order to avoid the high-quality audit partner being poached and leaving the firm.
Ultimately, people have egos and fears, and sometimes that crops up in these supposedly objective practices in unexpected ways. The makeup of the audit team also matters. Different auditors bring different motivations, perspectives, and levels of experience, which shapes the outcome of an audit.
The homogeneous teams, they might provide a higher audit quality because of the productive synergy, because they have from the similar background. Diverse teams are less likely to collude because of the different background.
Which type of team works best is really nuanced and shaped by things like risk-taking philosophies of senior partners and how secure auditors themselves feel in their roles. So we won't go into too much detail here, but Minlei's research reminds us that audits aren't just about checking boxes. They're about the people, their incentives, habits, and subtle ways biases shape decisions. Getting the team right can make the difference between catching a problem early or missing a risk that sinks the company. And that's something auditing firms need to keep a little bit more top of mind. Auditing is built on a critical principle, independence. But as we mentioned earlier, there are plenty of organizational or personal biases that can erode that independence. They're paid by the very companies they're auditing, and they operate in environments full of humans, client pressures, and career incentives. If independence is compromised, auditors just may not dig deeply enough, and even if they spot a problem, they may hesitate to bring it forward.
And there are plenty of opportunity for managers to manipulate the financial statements. So if the auditors are not independent, they first of all might not exert sufficient effort to collect audit evidence to discover what's wrong. And then secondly, if they discover something wrong, they might not insisting on the accounting adjustments that they propose the managers to do.
As a result, regulation exists to protect auditor independence. In both Canada and the US, rules prevent auditing firms from having, say, a financial stake in a client's company, or they require companies to have audit committees composed of independent directors to oversee the process, among many other checks and balances. Oversight bodies like the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, or the PCAOB in the US, and the Canadian Public Accountability Board set and monitor standards for auditors. Minlei says that regulation is often like a pendulum. Following a major accounting scandal, we usually see a big push towards more protection of auditor independence. After Enron, for example, the US introduced the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, largely prohibiting auditing firms from offering non-auditing services to its clients. But when things have been quiet scandal-wise for a little while, the pendulum swings back towards deregulation.
Yeah, recently there are signs indicating that potential cooling down of the regulatory environment in the U.S. For example, the PCAOB quietly withdrew two major rules. So one is firm reporting and the other one is a firm and engagement matrix, which were intended to increase the audit transparency. And then there is also potential dismantle of the PCAOB, that proposal in Congress. But then this one was not successful. The good news, well, put it simply, is that the PCAOB is safe for now.
So what can organizations do while the pendulum swings? For auditing firms, that might mean a bit of self-reflection.
For audit firms, they need to set up proper quality control within the firm, and self-inspection could be very helpful.
Ask yourself, are your teams mostly diverse or homogenous? Do you have conservative or risk-taking partners at the top? Are you purposefully keeping your superstars off high-profile projects out of fear they'll be poached? Do you suffer from familiarity bias or groupthink? Is your organization so compliance-focused that your teams are missing out on clients' true financial health? These are the questions leaders at these companies need to be asking. And for the companies being audited, Minlei has 3 thoughts. First, she thinks it's critical that companies take a closer look at creating strong auditing committees, the internal committees that are responsible for hiring the auditors and resolving any issues that are brought forward. Second, while most of the biases we talked about apply to auditors, Minlei reminds us that the same incentives and biases can sway the managers at the companies who are responsible for putting these financial statements together in the first place. That means these companies being audited need to think through whether they have the optimal compensation and the right internal and external monitoring. But most importantly, she thinks it's time that companies see auditing in a new light, not as a chore that needs to be done to satisfy regulators, but as an opportunity.
Instead of looking at auditing as something that they have to do, like a compliance thing that you have to hire the auditor, they can think the auditor as a strategic safeguard for the capital needs, for their reputation and stakeholder trust.
This has been the Rotman Executive Summary, a podcast bringing you the latest insights and innovative thinking from Canada's leading business school. Special thanks to Associate Professor Minlei Ye. Join us next month as we chat with Associate Professor George Newman about the real secret behind sparking creativity. If you're just listening for the first time, go check out some of our earlier episodes. We tackle everything from how we can remake the board of directors to how to prevent burnout on a team. Make sure you subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or Amazon, and consider giving this episode and the series a 5-star rating. And if you want more bold ideas in less time, go check out Rotman Visiting Experts, a monthly podcast featuring sharp conversations with today's top business thinkers, including Oliver Burkeman, Laura Huang, and Amy Edmondson. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. This episode was written and produced by Megan Haynes. It was recorded by Dan Mazzata and edited by Avery Moore-Kloss. Thanks for tuning in.